Hey everybody, Ernest Lopez here. Reflection 3 for El Movimiento, Ethnic Studies 3, Professor Rodriguez, number 24. Jumping right into the lecture. The lecture covered a variety of different areas, not only covered in the book, very similar to what we read in our book, but it went into depth as a part of the next phase in the Chicano movement and a lot of the uh, different types of leaders that were emerging, different types of experiences that people were starting to bring to light, and then the enculturation of different generations at this point, not just the original leaders, but also making sure that the movement was uh, tethered to different populations, different groups, different people, different ages, things like that. And so that was pretty interesting with the movement itself in terms of the lecture. Talking a lot about land grants. Land grants was an important area, in my opinion, not just in the Chicano movement, but from the Mexican American War onward, in terms of people's land being taken and or promised and or not provided. There was a lot of discussion around uh, Tijerina, the Santa Fe March, the Republic that was built of San Joaquin del Rio, the Chama, the courthouse raid, the aftermath of Tijerina, Los Coros Blancos, and La Mano Negra. Jorge Gonzalez and his famous speech, I'm sorry, not speech, poem, I Am Joaquin, which most people in the Chicano community, if they don't know of it, I'm sure that they know some parts of it, but it is pretty well known. The Chicano youth Liberation Conference, the Plan Espiritual de Aztlan, its terms, specific terms, broad terms, the overall movement of the tone and how it was shifting, what was staying the same, and then who was being excluded from the movement. That's a lot of what Professor Rodriguez was talking about. And then going into the readings itself, the movement spreads, pages 65 to 94. The movement has entered the next phase of development, like I was mentioning. There's more awareness about civil rights and civil liberties. Land grants and the law became more of a focal point for the cause. Another focus was learning the system and how to maneuver through it to implement into their plans. I thought that was a really important part of the readings. And the different groups emerging while other groups were taking action in different ways. I noted that because while some advocates for the Chicano movement were calling for peaceful protests and demonstrations, other emerging leaders didn't necessarily feel that way um, as a way to be seen, heard, or create change. And so some people were kind of doing less than peaceful things to get not just attention, but to take back what they thought was theirs and enforce themselves legitimately into American society. So the federal and state governments, they weren't really prepared for that type of social mobilization. So they took matters into their own hands, regardless of law and order, which only exacerbated stuff for people in different parts of uh, the growing Chicano movement in America. And then regardless of setbacks or impacts, negative impacts, the movement continued to seek out others to come forward and support the cause and remain united. So that was an important area. The walkout videos was an important one. If you haven't also watched the extra credit walkout, it was really worth watching. I definitely would recommend people to watch it. But basically, in 1968, students created and presented a list of demands to the Los Angeles Unified School District to put on record the racism and discrimination that they were experiencing. This was also the flagrant violation of their educational rights, despite laws in place to protect an equal education for all. And yet the board ignored it. And so, with growing animosity, students across the district organized and participated in walkout demonstrations. That garnered the board's attention, and the board used unlawful enforcement, in my opinion, to contain the growing momentum. But that resulted in the abuse of political power, unnecessary physical force, and police brutality against protesters. Students also and other demonstrators stood their ground, though, each time and remain united as one. These efforts were labeled as part of the Chicano movement and changed the lives of those involved as well as future generations in not just LA Unified School District, but all California school districts. And just the way that the movement was brought about, it really made for Reformation action to be, if not enforced, it started to be looked at and labeled in California's public education system. So it wasn't a brief moment. It did take time to be heard, listened to, and eventually demonstrators um, forced the district to take accountability in the social injustice toward minority students. And so major educational reforms occurred at both post and secondary levels. The video Land Back, there's a lot on here, but this video blew my mind. I remember when this started. I remember watching it on the news, but I didn't really like go into it. And so the whole point was Bruce's Beach, and these two affluent African Americans in the early 1920s came to California. They basically were denied land after numerous attempts to apply and acquire it, but eventually they were able to get it. They built a facility and a resort for other affluent African Americans and just African Americans in general to come and experience the American dream, the American life, and what it was like here in California. But unfortunately, that angered um, white Americans. They didn't want to see Black people prosper, and it really brought out the racism. And so they were able to unethically and immorally use the government system to take their land by eminent domain. And then eventually they were kicked out, and the land was acquired by the county, which was unfortunate because they actually, when you get acquired land through the government system, through eminent domain, you don't have to pay people. There's a process that goes through it. So they had to sue just to get some money back, but they didn't get anywhere near how much money their land was actually worth. So years later, decades later, this woman who moved to the same city, started to do research, realized all of this was going on, and started to advocate with the help of an attorney, and eventually got the land back. And it set a precedent for people to be able to get land back rights. And the land was given back to the descendants of the Bruce family, the husband and wife's family and descendants. And the sad part about it was the family then turned around and gave it right back for $20 million to the county. So it was a win for the African American community. It was a win for the family, but unfortunately, it wasn't a win for the residents, because that was her whole goal, was to make sure that their dream, the Bruce's dream, lived through them. And moving forward, that it was going to help other African Americans reach that same type of social mobility. But unfortunately, that's the result of that. The reflections, what stood out to me was gender inclusion as a topic, especially because at the end of our lecture that was mentioned, but to me that's hard when the language of Spanish itself is rooted in a binary language of gender. And so I thought that was interesting. What I really liked was that people learned the law and how it was enforced. What I disliked was that people used the lack of statehood and organized constitutions from various Western places to redirect land to Anglo settlers. That was a little unfortunate. I didn't know how many organizations developed to fight the cause that related to the Chicano movement, but also for their own specific needs. And then I also wonder if Las Gorras Blancas was inspired by the American KKK, as they seemed eerily similar in terms of burning buildings and causing chaos to dissuade a group of people from taking something that they felt belonged to them. And I was also shocked again by the outcome of Bruce's Beach. But the conclusion of everything was just that, to me, the Chicano movement is gaining traction and the momentum in various parts of the United States. The overarching theme of the Chicano movement is becoming more complex as it unveils intersecting issues on both internal and external areas. And then, regardless of the evolution of the movement, unity is stressed as the foundation to keep the movement alive. Together as one, or branches will stem into factions that take from the collective. And so that's pretty much what I learned. And then, of course, our references. Thank you.